Joining us right now to talk all things football is a guy who was with Mike T down in Mobile, ESPN NFL analyst, Field Yates, joins us now. Field, it's Jake and Mike. Appreciate you hopping on early with us here on a Sunday. Thanks for coming on.
No problem, guys. Good to be with you. It was a great week with Mike T, who I often remind him he is the mayor of Mobile. Nobody knows more people. Nobody gets more hellos throughout the days down to the practice field than Mike T. So you stick by him, and good things are usually going to happen.
Well, Phil, it is great for you to join us, and I appreciate that. It makes me feel incredibly old when I'm talking to Doug Nussmeier, the 1994 third-round pick of the Saints, about Garrett, and so it's old. But I know Jake's going to probably ask a very similar question, so just to get started, and thanks again for joining us early on Sunday, but what were your big-picture takeaways? Like, who stood out to you?
Yeah, Mike T, as you know, this is a week where we have a baseline of what players are, and then we're kind of seeing if that baseline holds, or in the case of other players, if that baseline perhaps had been underestimated. So I'll give you an example of a guy that I thought showed out well, which was Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle from Florida. If I had to guess, there were probably like 2 or 3 names total down there that could plausibly hear their name called in the first round. And Banks is a guy who, the reason why the baseline was a little bit more, I would say a little bit lower in terms of stock, was because he played 3 games this past season. He's 6'6", 330 pounds though, 35-inch arms, and perhaps the signature drill during the week of the Senior Bowl is the one-on-ones. It's up close, it's personal. We call it the pit for TV purposes. We're down there watching, basically 600 pounds of men just going back and forth at each other. Is it a perfect simulation of what the NFL game is like? No, but it's close enough that it definitely draws a lot of eyeballs. And Caleb Banks is a guy that really people had a hard time blocking throughout the week. And then we always ask about the quarterbacks, sort of reflecting on the week, Mike T. Taylon Green, as you know, I know you were a big fan of his from Arkansas, was the guy who probably showed the highest ceiling. I thought maybe start to finish, Luke Altmaier from Illinois was just the steadiest of the group. But Altmaier is the kind of guy that's not going to wow you with the physical traits or the eye-popping stats. But I think if you're looking at a guy who could be a solid number 2 quarterback in the NFL, he was probably the one that if I had to walk away and say, I'd use a day 3 pick on a guy, I feel like I could develop him into my backup, he would be the pick for me.
Field Yates is our guest, talking all things NFL with him. We're here in New York, Field, so of course the Jets have that number 2 pick. They got the number 16 pick as well. They have 2 picks in the second round, 33 and 44, and they don't have their long-term answer at quarterback on their roster currently. Your thoughts just on the approach that they could take at the quarterback spot? It doesn't sound like there's a guy in play at 2, but how do you see it playing out round 1, round 2? Where could the Jets potentially go to try and get their quarterback?
Let me give you the view of how I would approach it if I were the organization this year. And then I'm going to sort of speak out of both sides of my mouth and tell you why that might be a little bit of a flawed plan. My feeling is that this is not the offseason to be a buyer at quarterback. Between a weak draft class and the one quarterback who I have confidence in is going to be taken by the time the Jets pick number 2. That's Fernando Mendoza. And I would say a weak free agency class. There are not a bunch of obvious starters. Sam Darnold 2.0 is not available this offseason like he was last offseason. And the trade market, you can certainly kick the tires there. But as we know, guys are usually available because the team no longer wants that player for a specific reason. Tua Tagovailoa, Kyler Murray as examples. So if I'm the Jets, I'm saying to myself, I am flush with assets, not just this year, but more importantly next year. On top of that, and I know that things can change dramatically, but there is a much better chance that the 2027 draft is filled with somewhere between 3 and 5 first-round quarterbacks than there is this year. This year there's 1, maybe 2 if you're a believer in Ty Simpson. So organizationally, I would say to myself, we're not punting on this year. We're not trying to go 0-17, but we're going to go maybe sort of like medium-level swing at quarterback. If we want to take a 1-year flyer on one of these veteran quarterbacks, that's fine, but we're not making our big bet at QB this year. We're instead understanding that it might be a long year ahead. Let's develop other parts of the roster, and let's have our eyes focused on 2027. There are 2 problems there. 1, it's kind of admitting you're not going to win a lot of games this year. 2, if you're the head coach, Aaron Glenn, who there were people that were asking whether Aaron Glenn was going to stick after this season, you think he's going to feel great about his prospects of getting a third year if they kind of go into this year knowing they probably won't win many games? So this is one where it's like at the top levels of the organization, you have to have a clear and obvious plan, and you also have to communicate that internally and set up expectations, because if not, then it could be that the coaching staff feels like they're coaching for their jobs, and the front office is saying, well, we know we're not very good. So I just think whatever the message is, it's so essential for the whole organization to be on the same page about what the plan is. And so that would be, if it were my job to decide what the Jets would do, it would be, hey, let's not throw too many resources at the quarterback this offseason and save all of the powder. And we got as much powder as anybody going into future years and set up for a 2027 splash.
So with that said, Field, just a quick follow-up. If you were running the Jets at any level, who would you target to play? Someone's got to play quarterback in 2026. Who would be the 3 or 4 names you would look at?
Yeah, so we're talking about quarterbacks in the draft beyond Fernando Mendoza. And I'd say this is I feel this fundamentally, I felt this way over the past few drafts, is that once you get out of the first round, pretty much no quarterback investment is particularly high risk. And the reason I say that is, let's just say, I'm just playing this out here for a second. If the Jets were to be patient and take a quarterback at the top of the second round, 33rd overall, right? If Ty Simpson slides to the top of the second round, it's basically no harm, no foul. And I say that because, well, you'd work crazy to develop him, see if he become a player. It's not going to be like a 4-year, $9 million deal. Like that's like third quarterback money in the NFL, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So, Ty Simpson, if he gets in the top of the second round, to me, that's an easy one for the Jets. We talked about Taylor Green and Luke Altmaier. There's Garrett Nussmeier. There's Drew Aller, who's a big swing player from Penn State. I'm sure there are enough people in the area that have watched him for the past 4 seasons and left, sort of underwhelmed by what we have seen from him. And then I think as far as the veteran free agent market goes, certainly you can make the calls on the guys like Mac Jones or players that might be available, but it's going to be slim pickings on the veteran free agent market, a Kirk Cousins type. Like, I don't think those guys really move the needle that much. So I'm not overspending here. I know I'm sure if Aaron Glenn heard this plan, he would not be particularly thrilled. But to me, as we're looking at the big picture, like, I just don't think a quarterback that's available this offseason, unless there are names that I'm not aware of that are available, like, I don't think these players are going to totally change the bottom line for the Jets in 2026. I think if I'm a Jets fan, what I'm hoping for is 2027 is kind of our year to make our big move.
Field Yates is our guest right here on New York Game Day on ESPN New York and the ESPN New York app. Jake Asman alongside Mike Tannenbaum with you till noon. Field, last one for me on the Jets, just because I'm so fascinated by what happens at pick 2. It feels like in previous drafts there's that obvious best non-QB, but this year I don't know who that is. That's why I want to ask you, What would you do if you're the Jets with that second pick, assuming Fernando Mendoza is off the board at number 1?
First thing I'd do is I'd let people know quietly that the pick is up for grabs. Now, on the one hand, when you sort of led that question, Jake, by saying there's not an obvious, best non-quarterback in the draft, which means that it's probably going to be harder to create a market. But it can't hurt to try, right? So the first thing I'm doing is I'm letting people know if you want to come up and get number 2, if you've got a team that thinks that David Bailey or Arvell Reese from Texas Tech and Ohio State are clearly, one of them is clearly the best player in the draft, let us know. We'll make a deal. But if not, then I think you just got to look at premium positions. You just got to say, hey, what are the most important spots on the field if you nail the pick, right? Besides quarterback, it's pass protector, pass rusher, pass catcher. So you got to do an evaluation and figure out between the pass rushers up front. I mentioned Arvell Reese and David Bailey, and the pass protectors, guys like Spencer Fano, CeCe Mauinoa. Who's at the best grade? And I understand, the Jets, because of their recent investments in the offensive line, and that was the only team in the NFL to start all 5. You probably right away are leaning towards a pass rusher. So if the Jets stay at number 2, my default pick will be Arvell Reese versus David Bailey, and that's one that when I'm stacking these guys or Mike T is stacking these guys, we're doing it for the entire league. So we're not as focused on what is the Jets specific scheme when we're ranking them, number 2 and number 4 overall. The Jets can calculate how those guys fit into what they want to do schematically and how the coaches jive with the players during the pre-draft visit. So I could sit here and say Arvell Reese is definitely ranked higher than David Bailey. My guess is that if you had that debate within 32 draft rooms, it might be close to 50-50. So I probably lean towards taking one of those two rushers, assuming I can't get a deal to move down from number 2.
And Field, we have a lot of Giant fans in our audience. Giants are picking at 5, new head coach and John Harbaugh, a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around that. Any thoughts about where they may be going with that pick?
Two things here I would say is, one, I want to know who the offensive coordinator is, and we're still waiting on that information. Obviously, Todd Monken getting the Browns job through a little bit of what seemed like a wrench into the plans, but obviously great for Todd Monken. I'm sure John's very happy about his offensive coordinator getting that job as well. And then two is, I know that, we're going to spend plenty of time over the next few months talking about the draft. I always remind people that free agency precedes the draft, right? And Jermaine Illuminor, I think a very capable right tackle for the Giants, going to be a free agent. And if he's around, then I think you can cross off offensive tackle. If he's gone, then you got to be thinking long and hard about one of these offensive tackles that could very well be available at number 5. John is not Jim Harbaugh, but Jim Harbaugh and John have a lot of football ethos that they share. Jim famously a couple of drafts ago when the team took Joe Alt, described offensive linemen as weapons. I think John Harbaugh feels very similarly. But if Jermaine Illuminor is back in the fold, then I'm looking at these wide receivers who are available at the top of the draft. Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson, the two that I like the most out of Ohio State and Arizona State, respectively. The debate is not as simple. It's just one is clearly better than the other. It's what are you looking for? Carnell Tate, big, long, linear, 18 yards a catch last year, great hands, very good body control on the sidelines. Jordan Tyson is get the football in his hands, and good things happen. He's microwavable, instant offense. He's was banged up a little bit this past year. Quarterback was a situation really kind of unfolded poorly for Arizona State when Sam Levitt was no longer with the program or didn't finish the season as the starter. But Tyson's super explosive player, just a slightly different archetype. But offensive tackle or wide receiver would be where I am leaning.
Field Yates is our guest here on New York Game Day. Field, I'd be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts on the coaching carousel in the NFL. We had a record 10 head coach openings. There's still 2 to go following the Browns hiring Todd Monken, so the Cardinals' job and the Raiders' job are still vacant. Give us your thoughts. What has stood out to you amongst all these openings around the league?
Yeah, first of all, nearly a third of the league being open is just, it's just seismic. It's crazy. It reminds coaches and GMs that whenever you talk about best laid plans and being sort of judicious and being thorough, you better win, and you better win in a hurry because patience is no longer a thing in the NFL. I also was surprised that we had 10, not just because it's a big number, but because we came into this offseason. There's no Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn or guys who are being viewed as locks to become head coaches, right? At this time, this time minus a month ago last year, we were talking about, hey, who is going to get Ben Johnson? Who is going to get Aaron Glenn? There were hot candidates. Now, this year, there ended up being a couple because of firings, right? Most notably John Harbaugh. But, some of the names that got jobs aren't exactly names that we were talking about throughout the season and saying, like, wow, it's just a matter of time before that person's a head coach, and that is going to be a gigantic splash. We also know, and we've been reminded of this every year, it's really hard for us to grade every coaching hire or assess every coaching hire accurately or well. Right, there are some that, the minute they get hired, it looks like an absolute smash. Like Jim Harbaugh, when he went to the Chargers, huge get for them, and he's been really good. And John Harbaugh, I think, will be really good for the Giants, right? And Ben Johnson is the real deal in Chicago. Others were still figuring it out, right? I remember when Matt LaFleur got hired by the Packers all those years ago. It was like he had just coordinated a 32nd ranked offense, and everybody was down on it, and it's like, you got to be kidding me. Well, LaFleur just extended. He's been a really good and successful coach for Green Bay. So while some of these names are generating more sizzle than others, it's a reminder that it's really hard to grade these head coaching hires, and some of them that we think are kind of meh could end up being franchise-altering pieces for the better.
So, Field, here's something that everybody in America wants to know. You are lead analyst for the NFL draft for ESPN. You're the lead analyst for fantasy football for ESPN. You're a great father, and today is probably your first day off since, July. What are you going to do?
Well, Mike, I can tell you what I did this morning. You guys both said, thanks for joining us early, and I said it's almost lunchtime in the Yates household with 2 young children, plus two cousins in the house today. Our cousins got on the road, and within 15 minutes of getting on the road, flat tire situation popped up. So we've already gone over. We've helped change a flat tire, not particularly well, but the good news is we'll be up and running again here soon. And then that's a great question from there. Maybe Lowe's. There's a lot of snow still on the driveway at the Yates household, so I'll have to go get some more ice, and then and then I'll probably probably a few tears, not just for my children but for me, because it'll be like 48 straight hours since I got to be with you, Mike T, or 72. Mike T made the veteran move of getting out on Thursday night. I was stuck in Mobile for an extra evening. Great city, but I would have loved to get home a little earlier. And we'll find something. We'll figure it out. We will figure it out.
You survived a week with Mike T, Field, and you survived a radio segment with him as well.
Yeah,
I thrived for the week, but I always appreciate Mike is an all-time great human, and love being around him and love learning. And Jake, I'm telling you, and he sort of, I don't think he was quite as excited about this idea as I was, but Mike T, you spend 3 days with him and you come home with 20 great stories, and I'm thinking to myself, there is a book that is just waiting to be written. Wow. I would like to I'll ghostwrite it, I'll do the forward. I want to monetize it. I want to make some money off of it, because he is completely full of just some absolutely great stories, funny, interesting, compelling, unique. So Mike T, unfortunately, is too successful doing a lot of other things. I was going to say, if the well ever runs dry, you can write a book. Maybe you can just throw it onto your already busy plate here, Mike.
How about that,
well, I
Mike?
appreciate that. And I'm proud to be your teammate. And I'll tell you, I was the one that was learning sitting between Field and Lewis Riddick and Quick Kesnick and Matt Berry. It was great. And again, I think Field does a great job all year long, but just to watch Field, just know these players chapter and verse. It's a great week, and appreciate ESPN giving us the access and the Senior Bowl, because if you love the sport and you love football, it's a really unique week in the calendar.
That's awesome. Well, Phil, we appreciate you joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day off. Hopefully no more flat tires or crazy kids messing that up for you.
Yeah, the flat tires will probably, chances are we'll be in the clear. The crazy kids, that's a slam dunk. We'll have some sort of mayhem here soon.
Enjoy it. The great Field Yates with us there. Great job by him. Great insight on both the Jets and the Giants and the entire NFL draft. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back, react to some of what he said. We got to get into the latest with both the Jets and the Giants. Each team in New York searching for an offensive coordinator. Lots still to do. He's Mike T. I'm Jake Asman. It's the penultimate New York game day here on ESPN New York and the ESPN New York app.